Hey folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and we're back today with part 2 of ranking every Jaguar I have ever played. The production dates back all the way back to the 60s in this episode here, so strap on in. It's going to be an awesome ride and one that I have been wanting to complete for a long while now, especially because the Jaguar is my favorite offset guitar of all time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. So we do have a couple loose ends to tie up from the last episode, a couple that technically would be under the $1,500 range. I'll try to get through those quickly here, but they are guitars that I have owned or serviced, so I did not want to leave them out. So we are going to be starting off with the Fender Classic 60s Lacquer Jaguar. Now, if you aren't familiar with these, this is the first time that a made in Mexico Jaguar and also Jazzmaster came with a nitro lacquer finish. So if we go ahead and click on this one, this is one of the later examples. Prior to 2018, these Jaguars came with rosewood fretboards, vintage size frets. They were pretty much branded by folks as the made in Mexico AVRI 62 Jaguar, which did hold true in a lot of regards. Quickly diving into the specs here, these guitars did come with alder bodies. In my experience, I have actually owned 3 of these and that have serviced a number more. These did have a pretty thin nitro lacquer finish. I'm not sure if it was the flash nitro finish that was found on the AV65s that came out slightly before these. These also notably had a fairly thin neck profile, thin C neck profile, white dot inlays, and had an amber tinted neck. And one other thing of note that I found to be quite positive about these Jaguars was the fact that at least all 3 of them that I have owned and a few that have come in for service have been on the lighter side, at least 8.1 pounds, which is definitely lighter than the typical 8.5 to 9 pounds that you're going to find that a lot of Jaguars are. Another standout feature of this particular Jaguar was the fact that it came stock with AV65 pickups as well as a vintage style hard shell case. Now, on paper, it should have been the perfect guitar, but if you take a closer look at these, and especially for those of you that have owned one and have tried to mod them, you would probably have found a couple of things that were very, very annoying. The very first thing that is probably the most annoying about these guitars in particular was the fact that the tremolos that are featured on them stock were just not good. A lot of these that you will see in the aftermarket have already swapped out the vibratos, and it's definitely something to watch out for, especially because the tremolo routes or the tremolo cavities for these guitars were unfortunately off spec. For whatever reason, the CNC plans that Fender used for these guitars made those tremolo cavities too small. Maybe they were trying to make it match the fact that these tremolos did not have lock buttons. But as such, if you tried to drop an American Vintage reissue or AVRI unit onto these, you would run into the same thing that a lot of folks run into with aftermarket Jaguar bodies, which is the guts of the tremolo, the string anchor plate that actually pivots beneath the spring when you actuate the tremolo, will catch on the walls and actually get stuck against the walls if you try to pull the vibrato up. And every one of the ones that I've owned, all 3 of them, I have had to further route out or file out or Dremel out those tremolo cavities for an American Vintage reissue unit to actually function. The stock tremolos, as I said before, they didn't feel that much better to me than a stock Squier tremolo. They were just really, really janky and definitely was the biggest pain point of this guitar. These also came with your traditional original threaded saddle bridge. They were just not very good. The tolerances for the set screws made it so that the saddles and the bridge height overall would constantly kind of sink on its own, and so would benefit from Loctite 222 again if you end up picking up one of these, or if you own one or are struggling with those issues. The rest of this stuff Under the hood was premium electronic CTS pots, switchcraft switches, the whole 9 yards. You had your PVC coated wiring and also your conductive shielding paint in the cavities. These also had synthetic bone nuts and vintage style tuners made by Ping. Again, as I said before, on paper, these should have been the perfect budget Jaguars that were finished in nitro. But for some reason, there was always something about the feel of these guitars, particularly the neck, that just really didn't do it for me personally. I never went as far as to actually try to roll the fingerboard edges of these necks. Maybe if I had, that would have made it feel better, but these necks just felt a bit hard. Like the edges felt hard. They did not feel comfortable. The necks were maybe a little bit too slim. I do like slim necks, but maybe the ones on these were too slim. Like some of them felt slimmer than some of the 90s made in Japan necks. It basically was a 0.82 at the first fret and 0.90 at the 12th. But there was something about it. It's funny because I have one of the Squires that I have here, the vintage modified one, is 0.85 at the first fret, but then 0.88 at the 12th. So I don't necessarily have a problem with thin necks. There was just something about the execution of this series, and somebody else that I was discussing this with, I feel like they nailed it on the head when they just said something about the geometry of these necks felt off. And that's what it was for me. Maybe for you folks who are out there who've owned these and love them, maybe it's perfect for you, but especially for me who's played a lot of other guitars, it wasn't quite the made in Mexico American vintage 62 that some folks were billing it as. Far from, in fact. By contrast, the American vintage 62 necks felt so much more comfortable and natural in feel, in hand to me personally. So again, please don't let that color your impression of your own guitar. If you own one of these guitars, they were quite nice guitars overall, but that's the one thing that, and the whole deal with the tremolo cavity, held this one back from having a really top tier score. So I would say, so long as you keep that in mind when buying one of these, I'll give this guitar a solid B. Also keep in mind that people are going to try to rip you off for this guitar. They're going to say it's discontinued. They're going to try to charge you $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. Definitely don't do that. Take a look at the Reverb sold listings for these guitars. That is your best friend if you are purchasing used, even if you're not going to buy from Reverb, because you can see that some of these have gone for as cheap as like $900 with a mastery bridge. And also keep in mind that ones that were made prior to 2018 are going to have the rosewood fretboards. I believe these were discontinued 2018 or 2019. The ones from 2018 onward are going to have Palfero fingerboards. So keep an eye out for that if you have a preference either way. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So the next guitar that I've got here is the made in Japan Fender Special Edition Jaguar HH. This was actually my very first offset guitar. I got this either 2007 or 2008. This was my introduction and the beginning of my love story with offset guitars. This was a unique bird, or cat, I should say, in the fact that, as you can see, it's not your standard Jaguar. This one is set up more like a Gibson in Jaguar clothing, especially because of the stop bar tailpiece, as well as the tune-o-matic or adjust-o-matic bridge, as well as the dual humbuckers, which were the MIJ dragster humbuckers. They were kind of low output, I guess, for humbuckers, or vintage output, I should say, around the 7K range. And the switching or the wiring in this particular Jag was the same as vintage wiring. Your two independent pickup selection switches with your strangle switch, as well as your rhythm circuit up top, and then your volume and tone down below. But it had these cool kind of chrome metal like bell knobs instead of your typical Jaguar knobs. Now, neck specs on these, if I remember correctly, and I've serviced some of these even after I sold mine, is that they're fairly thin necks overall, probably in the 0.7, 0.79, 0.8 at the first fret range and probably around 0.9 to 0.92 for the 12th fret. So they were very comfortable, and depending on the era that you bought yours, and maybe also the color, it would either come with a 7¼ radius or a 9.5 inch radius. The whole thing was finished in a polyurethane or gloss urethane. This one is saying that it's 0.85 to 0.94. That's definitely a bit thicker than the one that I remember having. And for some reason, I feel like the one that I had was 9.5 inch radius, as well as having, I mean, by the pictures here, it's hard to judge, but these definitely look like they are bigger than vintage size frets. So I'm going to go ahead and try to guess from memory that these were most likely medium jumbo frets on this guitar. The one that I had also wasn't drastically heavy, probably right around the 8-pound range, and they were cool guitars so long as this is the kind of form factor you want out of your Jaguar. I ended up moving on from this because I feel like when I had discovered that other Jaguars and Jazzmasters and stuff had the offset vibrato and had the rocking bridges, and I was just having like vintage spec envy, and I realized soon after that this was not the one that was going to be my forever guitar. So I eventually sold it for a classic player Jazzmaster in 2008. But yeah, pretty nice guitars overall. I would say, again, despite the fact that this is not my particular kind of specs that I'm into, that it's still a pretty good Jag, so long as that is what you're looking for. So again, I'm going to give this another B. One last thing on the pricing for these, they usually go for right around $1,000. So just do your research. The Reverb price history is your friend. You can see here that quite a number of them have gone for less than $1,000, and some have gone for over. These also did come in other colors like Sunburst. I feel like I've seen maybe a red one before. Some of them have white pick guards instead of black, despite having the black body. But yeah, very cool guitars. All right, so now we had saved this one from the last episode because after tariffs, after customs fees and stuff, this is definitely going to push these guitars past that $1,500 price range. And these are the Fender Japan Traditional 2 late 60s Jaguars. And boy, oh boy, I love this guitar a lot. And I'm saddened because there was just, two things that held it back for me from keeping the one that I had. And yeah, it makes me sad that I had to move on from it because it otherwise would have been a perfect Jaguar. But anyway, these came out a few years ago. If an AV266 was going to be announced for a Jaguar, I feel like these started to come out around the same time. I think it was 2023, 2024 or so. One of these were first announced. I feel like I had a Lake Placid Blue was the one that color that I had. It was an ice blue metallic one, and Lake Placid Blue one came out very recently over the past year or two alongside black. But yeah, these were really, really excellent guitars. Basswood bodies, unlike some of the FSR traditional 60s models. But that also was a bonus because it made the one that I had at least around like 7.5 pounds. Gorgeous block inlay neck on these. Dark rosewood fretboards. These ones also had a 9.5 inch radius. These had vintage size frets, the traditional Jaguar threaded saddle bridge. It had two domestic made Jaguar pickups that sounded like decent, good vintage style Jaguar pickups. And it had the typical vintage accurate wiring configuration with your lead circuit below and your rhythm circuit above. Everything also by this point with Fender Japan is being cut to US specs. So if you wanted to swap the guard, for example, on this, then you could just swap it out for a US spec guard. You no longer had to hunt down Japan specific pick guards. Now, as we showed before, these also came in black as well as Lake Placid Blue as of the past year or two. And the thing that held it back for me is the thing that has held back the Fender Japan Jaguars from maybe from 2018 onwards, Don't quote me on that. I haven't verified again when they started doing the 40 millimeter nut width, but that's the thing that was the deal breaker for me with these. The 40 millimeter nut width is just too cramped for me, and I play a lot of open chords, cowboy chords and whatnot, and just felt a bit too cramped. That, and also the U-shaped neck. I was realizing, like, at first, especially with bar chords, I feel like they can feel a bit more comfortable because they fill the hand quite nicely. But I did find myself with certain bar chords, especially as I move up the neck, because these were quite chunky up at the 12th fret and beyond, I was just feeling a lot of hand fatigue as I become an old man here, from playing these in a way that I wasn't feeling on other Jaguars with not thin necks. Like, for example, the Johnny Marr Jaguar was not getting the same thing. So it definitely had to do with the fact that these U-shaped necks on these have a bit more shoulder to them. So if you're interested in these, obviously, if you have a friend or there's a shop anywhere around you where you can try it out, I highly, highly suggest that you try them out, because the necks on the Fender Japans from the past couple of years are definitely polarizing. You're either going to absolutely love them, or you're going to wish you could get on with them, but ultimately not be able to get on with them. These range, they usually start around the $1,300 range, but then like usually there's like 200 plus shipping. Don't get fleeced on these, because they are still producing them. Some people will be trying to ask, $1,700 plus and stuff for these. It would not be wise for you to spend that much money when you can get it for so much cheaper. And I highly also suggest that if you can get in contact with one of the shops, particularly one that I can think of, my favorite one that I'm just not going to name here out of respect for them. But if you can get in contact with them directly, their service is excellent. They will send you the guitar, and if you ordered like on a Sunday night, it's been on my doorstep here in New York City on, by Wednesday, 3 days later, which is crazy. Not even some of the US stores can do that. But yeah, this guitar is awesome. So we are going to go ahead and give this one a solid B plus here. And again, that's subjective to me. If I got on with the nut width, and the neck profile, I would definitely be giving this one an A. But for me personally, because it falls short in that department, I'm giving it a B plus. All right, so next up, we're moving back into our modern spec Jaguars with the Fender American Professional Classic Jaguar. This was a release in fall of last year, 2025, and it was a very welcome addition. People were excited for this because there were a number of things about these specs that people liked more than, and corrected some of the gripes folks had with the original American Professional Classic Jaguar, namely the fact that this brought back our strangle switch. It had swapped out the blade switch for a three-way toggle, which I felt was kind of a downgrade because you lost your series. Some people, including myself, like the new pickups in here way more than the V-Mod pickups. These are the Coastline 65 Jaguar pickups, and it did sound pretty sweet through my Fender Princeton in my deep dive review of this Jaguar. In case you didn't see it, definitely click on the link up here to check that out if you're interested. And then these also came with nice tinted necks, whereas the necks on the American Professional Jaguars were very, very pale. Some people didn't like that. The neck specs, aside from that, were very kind of similar to the original one, except I think these ones were maybe ever so slightly slimmer than the American Professional one Jaguars. These had kind of like a modern C profile neck, so it felt fast, medium jumbo frets. And I also like the fact that these came with more vintage style tuners. These are the classic gear tuners, so the holes for the bushings are as such that if you wanted to put like sealed modern style tuners in this thing, they would be drop-in replacements. But I feel like the headstock looks a little bit goofy with all of those huge metal rings around, rather than the sleeker like bushings that you will find on like a set of like Goto or Kluson reissue vintage style tuners. These also came in really nice colors like the Sherwood Green, Fire Mist Cold. I feel like there was like a faded Dakota Red. And if you're interested in a maple neck version, they do make one, and that only comes in Lake Placid Blue. If you need to buy one of these new, they are around $15.99. I highly suggest picking one up from an aftermarket or third-party retailer like Sounds, because again, at least for me, I'm not supporting Fender by buying directly from them at this time. I do not support their actions, all of this legal cease and desist bullshit that they've been doing. I've been seeing them going for sometimes as cheap as like $1,100 or $1,200, and they are very, very nice modern style Jaguars. The one last thing that I did want to mention with these is that they do feature a slightly wider nut width, 1.685 inch. So you're going to feel these strings kind of be spread out just a little bit more too on here, and it's going to be more comfortable for folks who prefer a bigger and wider feeling neck, despite the fact that it is not a fat or thick neck. So I quite like that about this model. The only other thing that I wanted to bring up with this is that I have had a number of these in for service, and I feel like 3 of them came without ground wires for the tremolo. That is usually where the ground wire on these go. There is a hole that goes from the tremolo cavity to the lead control cavity, and there was no ground wire despite the fact that there was a hole there. And I did double check to make sure that they didn't line the ground to a bridge thimble, because that's the other location that you'll usually find your string ground. And there wasn't one there either. So that is something to keep in mind, is that the quality control can kind of be hit or miss with these. With that regard, the fretwork on most of the ones that I've had has been decent. Some of them have needed enough attention to need a fret leveling, to need a fret dressing. But again, that really does come down to the environment and how much humidity there is. And the other thing that I did want to bring up is that this also is a bit of a downgrade from the previous American Professional Jaguar, in the fact that this no longer comes with that nice molded Jaguar hard shell case that the original one did. And also I found that the bridges on these are also no longer the American Professional 9.5 inch radius bridge. In fact, these are the same zinc alloy bridge that they use on the Jaguar Classic vibes. So that was really disappointing to find, because it's a bridge that is of lesser quality overall. And then the other downgrade that I found that they quietly swapped out is the fact that it is no longer the same guts and specs as the American Vintage reissue tremolo. The last American Professional was basically an American Vintage reissue tremolo, but with a different collet, a screw-in arm and collet on that one. They have returned back to the pop-in arm and collet, but these are the same Korean-made units that are featured on the Vintera 2 and Vintera 3 Jaguars. So you can see actually that these units that they're using here are coming from the Vintera 250s Jazzmaster, because they have the patent pending stamp. So Fender is doing Fender and using up the stock of whatever they still have, I guess. All in all, I think the American Professional Classic Jaguar is a great guitar. I feel like I can't give this one like super high marks with regards to, you know, just what I've seen with quality control and also the downgrades on this. So I kind of want to give it a B- for that reason. But if we're not comparing to another, to its predecessor and kind of what you've lost as compared to the original American Pro, and just basing it on its own merits, I feel like it does deserve a B. We've got a lot of Bs, folks, a lot of Bs. All right, moving along now, we are now at our Fender Japan FSR Traditional 2 60s Jaguars. Now, these have had some variants over the past couple years since they came out. I feel like these first started popping out maybe 2023, 2024. The big change or difference with these ones are the fact that these FSR models do have alder bodies. Instead of the basswood, they came in special run colors like this Sonic Blue with the matching headstock. There was Inca Silver with matching headstock as well. And also Fiesta Red was the other color. Sherwood Green with a matching headstock. So these are really, really nice Jaguars. The one that I had was, I think, around 7.6, 7.7 pounds. So very lightweight. Some of these, depending on which store you were buying from, the store that had the exclusive for these specific models, some came stock with a pure vintage 65 pickup. So that was another nice addition. Now, unlike the standard traditional 60s Jaguars, these did come with a Mustang bridge, a 56 millimeter string space bridge, which was problematic for some folks because your outer E strings would come a little bit too close to the edge of the fretboard, which for some players resulted in their fingers and the strings kind of slipping off of the fret. I never really had that issue myself, but keep that in mind when you're buying one of these. Just really, really nice quality overall. All of the same things that I've said so far about Fender Japan, the traditional 60s era, stand for this one as well. And I feel like these ones felt even nicer to me personally because of the bound necks. It took a little bit longer for these to exhibit any fret sprout due to fluctuations in humidity and stuff. Super nice, almost ebony colored fretboards on pretty much every single one of these that I have had in the shop. I actually owned this Sonic Blue one as well as the Sherwood Green one at some point. And like what I just said about the traditional late 60s, again, the reason why I had to let go of mine was because of the 40 millimeter nut width and the U-shaped neck. Ultimately not comfortable for me to play, but they are so good. I really, really wish, I'm begging Fender Japan, if you are listening, I understand that these guitars in your country are primarily aimed at women, that most of the famous players who play Jaguars in Japan are women. I'm not saying that they're women's guitars. It wouldn't bother me if they were women's guitars. I definitely would still rock one, but make both, right? So that people with bigger hands can have a model that is more comfortable to them. Because seriously, Sonic Blue is my favorite color. And I would never have let this go if I had gotten on with the neck. Now, they did start to release versions of these back in 2025 that did return to the C-shaped neck, and that made me really, really hopeful, optimistic. I haven't tried one of these yet. Some of them did come again with the pure vintage 65 pickups, but this time around with the C-shaped neck versions of these, that they didn't do a matching headstock. A weird omission, I guess, or the fact that there are a number of folks out there who are not fans of a matching headstock. So yeah, I would be curious to see what those felt like, if that improved and maybe could make a 40 millimeter nut width more tolerable to me. But I can't say for certain until I actually get one in hand. So I will have to reserve my judgment until that point. But yeah, I will just keep wishing and hoping and praying that that Fender Japan does at some point bring the standard 42 millimeter 1.65 inch nut width and just C shape back to the market. So for this, because it's just such a good guitar, despite the fact that I couldn't get on with that. That's a matter of personal preference. The fact that these do have all their bodies, that they can come light, they come in these amazing colors, that they come with pure vintage 65 pickups already, some of them. This has to be an A-tier guitar. This has to be an A-tier guitar. So I'm trying to look at this as objectively as possible. You'll usually find these in the $1,300 to $1,500 and up range. Again, if you know where to order them, you can get them for right around $1,300 or so shipped before the tariffs, which I believe are, if you're in the United States, I think they're 10 or 15%. Definitely look that up, or ask the folks that you are buying from how much that would be prior to committing, because that would be the wisest thing to do. So moving on, while this looks similar to the Fender traditional to late 60s Jaguar, this is in fact one of the Fender Japan JG66B, and that B stands for the maybe the block inlays, maybe the binding, maybe both. But yeah, this is a goated version of the Jaguar because it is just so nice. It is everything that I wish that the newer traditional late 60s Jaguars were. These came most often in sunburst, Olympic white, and the candy apple red. This one here in particular has F-tuners. The majority of the ones that I've seen do not have F-tuners. They just came with Goto SD91s. But they were awesome. And if you got one of these from the 2000s, they had alder bodies, just beautiful, impeccable finishes. Now, the same thing goes for these that I said for the other 90s to 2000s MIJ and CIJs, where they lacked in the electronics department and the hardware department. The tremolos, the Japanese tremolos on these were pretty weak. They had like weak springs, and they just did not feel nearly as responsive as the American vintage reissue units. The tolerances for the screws on these bridges, like most people literally like didn't even give these these bridges a chance and just immediately swapped them out back then for like Mustang bridges, because these came out before the Mastery bridge had come out. Some people even put Tune-o-matic bridges because of how horrible they thought these bridges were. These came with the mini pots, not only in the rhythm circuit where they're supposed to be, but also in the lead circuit. So, you know, that left a bit to be desired, but they were also perfectly functional. So I'm only putting that up as a weak point because that's kind of how the offset community looked upon these. The pickups, again, were also, they sounded good for the most part. Definitely American Vintage reissue or the American Vintage 65 pickups sounded better than these. These could be microphonic for sure, so problematic in live settings or under high gain, but just fantastic Jaguars. Otherwise, the craftsmanship on these was just impeccable. And these are the guitars that I talk about when these are coming to me, you know, 25 plus years after they were produced and still not needing fretwork somehow, right? Unless they, you know, they've been played so heavily that there are deep divots. But very rarely have I gotten one of these and had like unseated frets. Very rarely have I gotten one of these where it had like severe fret sprout. So just really amazing instruments otherwise. And definitely like you couldn't ask for a better modding platform. I believe these ones also came with the 42 millimeter nut width. Maybe some of them came with a 1 5/8 inch nut width, which is not big enough of a difference for me to usually notice. That is also actually the vintage spec that you will find on most 60s Jaguars as well. So that never bothered me, but just super comfortable. The fretwork, all of the finishing, everything, the fit and finish on these, legendary. And so for that reason, right, despite the crappy electronics or despite the weak hardware on these, I mean, you just would never, you're never, not even compared to what they're putting out today, are going to find like examples that are as solid as these old ones are. And again, that's my personal opinion. But there is just something, and you have to try one to know that I'm not just full of shit here, folks. So, I'm going to go ahead and give that an A because these are A tier. I almost want to give it S tier because, to be honest with you, some of the best Jags I've ever played have been the MIJ, bound and block models from this era. You know what? I'm going to give it an A+. I'm going to give it an A+. It's my list. I can give these guitars whatever the hell scores I want to, right? But I'm trying to still stay somewhat objective. So because of that weak hardware, we're going to, and electronics, I'm going to save that and keep it from being our first S tier. Now, one final note before we move on from the JG66Bs is that I have put the pricing at between $1,500 or $1,600 plus. And that is pretty fair, a pretty average price for these. You just kind of have to like look up JG66B. Some of them have different numbers that follow that naming convention. And a lot of the times you will find them for, you know, right around that $16 to $2,000 mark, but they are worth every penny, especially as compared to other guitars, new guitars that are in that price range. All right, so let's move right along now to our next one. And now we are at the American Original 60s Jaguar. And I have actually owned two of them. And these are really, really nice Jags. The American Original 60s series, I feel like, is just really underrated. They are just really damn nice Jaguars. I'm not going to lie. They basically were kind of like the sequel to the American Vintage 65. A couple of specs were modernized. In general, the American Original 60s, I feel like, is like a black sheep in Fender's kind of canon. Or history, especially in their modern history, because they did not follow the convention, right? Like it should have been after the American Vintage 65 was discontinued, they should have just moved on to the American Vintage 2, right? The 66 is what naturally would have come out, but for whatever reason, Fender decided to keep the American Vintage 65 formula for the most part. There were only a couple of changes from the American Vintage 65. The big one is the fretboard radius changed to a 9.5 inch radius instead of the 7.25 radius of the AV65. They also decided to add a little bit of height to the frets this time around. So rather than the vintage size frets that they had on the AV65s, they went with vintage tall frets. And that's a difference really of 0.005 of an inch. It's like almost imperceivable. Some people swear they can feel the difference. I really can't feel barely any difference, to be honest. The other thing that they changed too is rather than having the pure vintage 65 pickups, for whatever reason, probably because they had stock left over from the American Vintage 62 series, but these came with American Vintage 62 pickups. These also came with the original threaded saddle bridge, the Jaguar I've vibrato, all of the premium stuff underneath the hood, the brass shielding plates, the aluminum shielding plate under the guard, all of the Gavitt cloth covered wiring, your CTS pots and switchcraft switches, the whole premium affair. The downside of these is that a lot of them were heavy, but that's fairly standard for Jaguars, at least with my small test group of like the 2 or 3 that I owned and the handful of these that have come through. I've never had a light one in the shop. They all kind of were almost in that 9-pound range. So yeah, really, really nice Jags, especially for folks who don't get on with the 7.25 radius. So I'm going to have to go ahead and give the American Original 60s series an A. I really didn't have any gripes at all. And you can find these sometimes for as cheap as $1,700. They come with the nice G&G cases still. And yeah, just I really didn't see any issues. Now, keep in mind that some of these were produced during COVID times. These were discontinued. They started in 2018, discontinued 2022. So some of them were made in that dark period. So quality control could have been maybe questionable, depending. Definitely let me know if you got one that had questionable quality. But yeah, none of the ones that I have owned or worked on ever had issues like that. Never really needed anything more than like a full setup. Okay, let's move on. All right, y'all are probably gonna hate me for this because, man, as much as I want to pay tribute to the legend, our grunge god himself, Kurt Cobain, I cannot say that I've ever played or serviced one of these that I ended up liking. And that is the Kurt Cobain Jaguar. So I'm talking specifically about the made in Mexico versions of the Cobain Jag, and not the made in Japan ones that were made in the earlier 2000s as a special run. But yeah, just, you know, going over the specs for these, you can already see, especially if you're familiar with the channel, that there's a lot of stuff here that is not my bag personally. First of all, it's got 2 DiMarzio humbuckers in here. You know, cool if you're into humbuckers. I definitely missed, every time I played one of these, just missed that classic Jaguar tone, the brightness, because these just, I don't know. I just am not a fan of humbuckers in general, so I'm just going to leave it at that. These also came with a Goto 2-pneumatic bridge, which is a mismatch to the 9.5-inch radius that this the neck on this had. So I could feel that right away. That is another thing that, like, if there's a totally wired guitar shit list, the 2-pneumatic bridge is definitely high up there on my shit list of things that I hate on offset guitars. And that's no disrespect to all of our indie rock gods that put them on there because it was the only option, but it is now 2026 and much better options than the 2-pneumatic have existed for almost 20 years now. Right? Or if we consider the Mustang bridge, in my opinion, they've quite literally existed for 60 plus years. So yeah, this also had 2 independent volume controls, and in addition to the tone control. That's why you have 3 knobs on there. It got rid of your 3 independent switches. And in fact, this guitar doesn't even have a strangle switch at all, despite the fact that the hole for it exists there. It just has your 3-way toggle. And then it's just got your standard rhythm circuit. The neck, like, I wanted to love the necks on these. I've had at least half a dozen of these in the shop. Each one of them, every single time, has needed fretwork, despite the fact that they've had binding, they've had sharp fret ends. I've had ones with wavy fretboards, like warped necks and stuff. And so I just feel like, at least in my experience, the quality of these guitars is not great. The other grave sin of this particular Jaguar is the fact that it came with that classic player tremolo unit, the one with the screw-in arm. Just not very high quality metal used on this, not high quality construction. I really hated the screw-in arms on these. I know some people are like, drop a spring in them and that kind of helps to keep it in place, but they were oftentimes like a squeaky mess. And believe it or not, one of the solutions that I found that worked well for these screw-in arms, if people didn't want to swap out the collets on them, was using thread locker, like the low strength Loctite Purple 222. Just one line down one side of the end of the tremolo arm that had the threads. Put it back in, and you would see that the arm would basically stay where you leave it. You would have a nice range to the arm, and no more squeaking either. So this is not the type of arm that you can do like the bend trick on or anything. I think mostly the reason why I can't give these a high score is because the ones that I've had have had terrible quality control. There have been folks who have bought them new, that, you know, waited past the return window to get them serviced. And unfortunately they were shit out of luck and had to spend hundreds more dollars to get them playing the way that they should have from the factory. And the crazy thing is, this is a $2,000 guitar. And I cannot think of any spec here that merits this guitar being $2,000. And that's my personal opinion. I definitely would not advocate for buying one of these new at the prices that they are now. Or maybe money for you is a drop in the bucket, right? If that's the case, then whatever, good for you. But yeah, you can get these around the $1,300 mark. I see them sometimes as cheap as like $1,200. So again, do your research to check out to see if you can get them for a better deal. Check out places like Guitar Center, our Musician's Friend Used, the Sweetwater Used marketplaces, and definitely your private forums like offsetguitars.com or the gear page to see, because you can get them definitely for cheaper than what they're listed on Reverb for too. Because if it was me, I feel like I would not feel good about paying any more than $1,200 for one of these guitars, especially knowing the issues that I've had to sort on them personally. So with that said, I am so sorry, Kurt. I am so sorry. Accept my apology, but I have to give your guitar a D. It's not good. At least the ones that I've had. Right? Don't at me. Don't get mad at me. Again, I've had a half a dozen of these in the shop. So I think that's a pretty good and sizable test group to be objective for. And if that many guitars had issues, then I don't think I'm tripping. So especially for that price, it's crazy. Hell no. All right, let's move on. All right, so seeing the next one is already making me nostalgic because I have owned a number of these over the years, and these were the gold standard for Jaguars from basically 1999 up until they were discontinued in 2012 and replaced by the American Vintage 65, and that is the Fender American Vintage 62 Jaguar. This was the creme de la creme of Jaguars, and it was a luxurious experience, especially if you had only had Japanese Jaguars prior to this, if you had only had a Squire Jaguar. Just opening up that G&G hard shell case and just smelling the nitro, especially if you got one in good condition. Again, it was like a special ritual or something. I still remember the very first one that I got was a sunburst one like this. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. These are legendary and still, hold up, as some of the best Jaguars ever produced, in my opinion. So just going over quickly the specs on these came with alder bodies. They came in the most custom colors of any Fender Jaguar run that's ever come out, aside from the actual vintage ones, for the almost 13-year stretch that these were produced, and damn good legendary custom colors on top of that. They came with the American Vintage 62 Alnico 2 pickups, which had a lot of fans, and some folks definitely preferred the American Vintage 65 ones, but I thought that these sounded nice. They had a kind of darkness and a little bit more present of a mid-range on them that I really, really appreciated. The necks on these were just heavenly. That nice pre-CBS, specifically 62, 63 style, slimmer profile neck, usually about 0.82 at the first fret, or 0.83 up to just only ever got as thick as like 0.92 or 0.93 at the 12th. So a perfect neck profile for me. That is some of my favorite neck specs right there. And nitro finish, and just came with an amazing amount of case candy. It had the Goto SD91 tuner stock. None of these that I got ever exhibited any sticky nitro feel to the backs of the necks. I feel like the formula for their clear coats back then was definitely different than what they've been using in more recent years. And actually, what's funny is, one of the things that people kind of have gripes with about the American Vintage 62s, particularly the solid colored ones, was the fact that they had really thick finishes, like almost bulletproof finishes on them. I feel like it was a little bit thinner, of course, on the on the transparent ones. But if you ended up getting like an ice blue metallic and you ended up getting some chip out, you could see that the finish was at least a millimeter thick, if not thicker than that. But I never had a problem with it. That and the fact that a lot of these, most of the ones that I have played of the American Vintage 62s have firmly been in the 8.5 pound and up range, quite heavy. The last one that I owned was an Inca silver one, and do I miss that thing? It was so gorgeous. But yeah, legendary guitars. I miss mine very, very much. One other thing to note here is that these did not feature an actual real bone nut. I don't know what Fender was smoking back then, but almost all of their American Vintage series from this time featured synthetic bone instead. All the other appointments underneath the hood, everything was to vintage spec, high quality cloth covered wiring, high quality AVRI tremolo, even the vintage style bridges on these, basically the best ones that you can get, new, right? The tolerances for the screws, I don't remember having to immediately lock tight any of the screws for these, at least back in the day. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not looking at them through rose tinted glasses here. Over time, of course, they could wear out and you would have to apply some, but, or back then, before I knew about Loctite, I was actually using clear nail polish and it would kind of do the same thing. But yeah, and if we just take a look here at the colors that this thing came out with, right? If we scroll down, you can see, came in Sunburst, Black, Candy Apple Red, Dakota Red, Fiesta Red, Ice Blue Metallic, Inca Silver, Ocean Turquoise, Olympic White, Sherwood Green, Surf Green. There were even these Yamano Japan special runs of the American Vintage reissues that came out in maybe the early 2000s and unlocked even other special colors. Aside from this, I do also want to, the score that I want to give these is going to be the same score that I would have given if I had a separate one for the, like the Dave's Guitar Shop, Wildwood Guitars, thin skin American Vintage 62s. The big difference with those was that they did not have the poly undercoat underneath the finish. So that flash coat nitro process, same as what they did on the AB65s and also in the Fender Custom Shop. Supposedly let the wood breathe more. And also those had a 9.5 inch radius, and some of them came with medium jumbo frets instead of the vintage size frets. But those were phenomenal guitars and unlocked even more colors than that, like your Aztec Golds, for example, Burgundy Mist. Beautiful, beautiful guitars. And so no doubt I'm going to be giving the AVRI 62 the very first S tier. It is an S tier guitar, in my opinion. It really doesn't get that much better. I think it firmly deserves a spot as an S tier. Pricing on these, as you can see here, it supposedly some have gone for as cheap as $1,500. What lucky duck got those? I still remember when these would go for like $1,100 to $1,300 all day, every day in the 2010s. I miss those times. They sit between usually this like $1,800 to like mid $2,000 range, depending on the color that you find and the condition that it's in. All right, moving right along. We actually have the next one in hand here. And this, my friends, is most likely my favorite non-custom shop, non-vintage Jaguar that Fender has ever released. And this is one of the American Vintage 65 Jaguars. Just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous guitars. This is the first time that Fender would release a Jaguar in the US as a reissue with a bound neck. They also distinguished from the American Vintage 62 by giving this one a thicker neck. This one that I have here in hand is about 0.84 at the first fret here and right around 0.96 at the 12th fret down here. So it has a really nice fuller feel in hand, kind of on par with the Johnny Marr neck, but more of a round C shape rather than an oval C shape. The fit and finish on these guitars was just incredible. These came with the American Vintage 65, aka the Pure Vintage 65 pickups, the premium affair with the CTS pots, switchcraft switches, cloth covered wiring, brass shielding plates, aluminum shielding plate under the guard. Had this beautiful, I know that my camera is washing this out a bit, but just a beautiful eggshell white pick guard as well. And this is one of the rare, I believe these were a special run, but Sonic Blue was not a standard color for the American Vintage 65 Jags at first. And this one had a satin nitro finish on the back here. You can see it's glossed up quite a bit since owning it and playing it, but it's quite a pristine example that I've got here. This came in a black G&G hardshell case with an orange lining to it, and my God. And this one, it's not light. It's firmly in the 8.5, 8.6 pound range. But just my favorite Jags. I've been wanting one of these for so long, and never actually got to own one myself. I've serviced quite a number of them over the years and was always jealous. So when I saw this one pop up, I sold a bunch of of my made in Japan guitars and ended up keeping this one. And I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to part with this one, despite actually owning an actual vintage 1965. And they got a lot of things very, very close to my actual 1965 Jaguar back here. But yeah, the fit and finish, I haven't had to do a fret leveling. I've had to do a little bit of fret dressing on this one. And this is actually the same Jaguar. And I know Again, it's not quite as green as Moeka's, but that Moeka signature Jaguar that Fender Japan released is actually based on this guitar here. So I have nothing but amazing things to say. This had that flash coat nitro process on it, so no thick undercoat here. So can I feel it resonating more than the American Vintage 62s that I've had? Yeah. Or maybe it's just a placebo, or maybe I am hallucinating, or maybe because it's my guitar. Again, all of this stuff is subjective. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous guitar overall. And this is another one that I think firmly belongs in the S tier because they were phenomenal. Yeah, firmly an S tier Jaguar. All right, so the next Jaguar on our list here is the Fender 50th anniversary Jaguar. And this is quite a nice Jaguar. I'm not gonna lie, there's some things here that were definitely not my particular favorite specs, but overall, the ones that have come in for service have been solid Jaguars. This differed from the American Vintage 62 and 65 in that it was one of the first reissue Jaguars that Fender USA has done that did have the block inlays, as you can see here. Now, on none of its anniversary models did they get the actual block sizes right. These are very similar to the block sizes that you'll see on the Squier Jaguars and also the Troy Van Leeuwen Jazzmaster, ever so slightly smaller if you compare to the vintage ones or even the Fender Japan ones. But not that big of a deal unless you are like a vintage accurate, like Insano. And it came in these beautiful colors like this burgundy mist. I am a simp for burgundy mist. So every time I had one of these come through the shop, I would just fawn over it for that reason alone. These also differed in the fact that they didn't have vintage size frets. These ones had medium jumbo frets. They also had a 9.5 inch radius. They came with the original threaded saddle bridge and the AVRI tremolo. But just to set it apart, to make it special, they decided to do what they did on the classic players and move that tremolo up to the modern placement to give it better break angle behind the bridge. Again, not my preferred spec, but also wouldn't prevent me from loving it all the same if someone gifted me one of these, or if I got one for a steal of a price. So yeah, this Jag is awesome. I don't remember if there was anything special about the finish, because it was released around the same time as the AV65, so I wouldn't be I wouldn't be surprised if it was also that same thin skin nitro process on these ones. These have a typical price range of, you can sometimes find them for less than $2,000. If we take a look here, as you can see, yeah, sometimes you'll find one for right under $2,000. Apparently one went for $1,600. Crazy, in candy apple red. And this was only a month ago. Holy moly. November 2025. Really? Wow. One went for $1,350 in late 2025. Crazy. So yeah, so apparently you can get good deals on these guitars. They do come with hard shell cases, those nice G&G hard shell cases, and they're awesome guitars. Man, I can't really fault this one either, but it doesn't have my preferred specs. And because this is a subjective list, I'm just going to go ahead and give this thing an A+. The next one that we're looking at is a 60th anniversary Jaguar. And these ones came in two colors, same kind of block specs as the other one, but a return back to the 7 1/4 radius and the vintage placement of the vibrato unit here. This one also came stock with the Fender F tuners instead. A little bit more period accurate for the blocks and binding. And these were beautiful guitars. These ones, unlike the previous 50th anniversary, which I forgot to mention, also came with hot output Jaguar pickups. They were all right. They were not overly hot, but just brought more mids into the mix and could have your tube amp cook more readily than a vintage output one. But these ones literally just reuse the American Vintage 62 pickups again. So another thing that I loved about these was the fact that they had a neck thickness that was kind of like in between the AVR 62 and the AV 65. Definitely the ones that I've had in the shop had like a neck thickness at the first fret of about same as the AVR 62. 0.82 or 0.83, but then a bit thinner than the AV 65 at the 12th, with the ones that I had right around 0.94 at the 12th fret, and just gorgeous, gorgeous playing guitars overall. This is another one. This is another one that I think will score higher than the 50th anniversary, just because I definitely like the specs of this more. S tier. S-tier Jag right there. All right, my friends, we are getting through it. And the next one on our list is the Johnny Marr Signature Jaguar. I have owned a number of these over the years. Unfortunately, I never owned any of the special colored ones, but I've owned both the Olympic white as well as the KO metallic finish. But I ended up selling those after I found this one. Shout outs again to my friend, Johnny Reyes, who sold this to me after getting it refinished. He was trying to replicate Johnny's Comet Sparkle, but I feel like this is more of kind of like a gold sparkle or a champagne sparkle, instead of Johnny's Comet Sparkle, which very much looks like almost like an Olympic white, with sparkle flake shot over the top of it. It's got kind of like a glowing kind of look to Johnny's, whereas this one is very much kind of like a nice gold. But yeah, the Johnny Marr Jaguar is so good. I cannot sing its praises enough. This one that I have here is a 2023 or 2024 model. I really, really love this guitar. The star of the show here is undoubtedly the neck, but it has some other really premium features. I love the bridge that comes stock on this. The one that I have on here right now is a Statrum because I had an extra Statrum laying around, but the bridge is nice. Some of the earlier ones, I believe pre-2016 or pre-2018 Johnny Marr Jaguar models, unfortunately had the 56 millimeter string spacing that left, again, your outer E strings dangerously close to the edge of the fretboard. I had one of those ones, but they had corrected those, I believe, in 2018 with the appropriate 52 millimeter string spacing to solve that problem. That bridge also, by the way, is a clone of the Statrum, in that it does have those plastic bushings at the bottom of the bridge post to keep the extra wide set screws from recessing back into the post over time, which would make your bridge sink. So that is the same. The one thing that it doesn't have as compared to the Statrum is that it does actually have springs, and also the intonation adjustment screws for these saddles are not offset like on the Statrum. It also has a Statrum clone collet and arm system that has a little nylon sleeve inside the collet so that you never experience any flop from your arm. I said it in my review of the Johnny Marr video. I'm not a huge fan of the bare knuckle pickups that are in this guitar. I feel like that's the weakest point overall of this guitar. I understand why he went with such low output Jaguar pickups, and that's because the best tone on this guitar, hands down, is the series position, and in particular the series position with the bass cut switch engaged. Just the first bass cut switch. I mean, you can use just the series only bass cut switch, and that sounds great as well. I don't need it usually to be double thinned out, but yeah, just wow. And the oval neck profile, supposedly this is a clone of Johnny's like 1965 Jaguar neck profile, and it definitely does remind me of a bunch of 65s or 60s Jaguar necks that I have played. It is a bit more substantial at the 12th fret, usually around the 0.95, 0.96. So in the same ballpark as the AV65, but the oval C neck shape is something unique and special here. It feels like it's been worn in over time from playing, and so it doesn't have as much shoulder as other, full C Jaguar necks out there. This does also, from the factory, have a melamine nut, so a synthetic nut, because Johnny, I believe, is vegan or vegetarian, and so did not use a bone nut. This one here Johnny, the previous owner of this guitar, had this swapped out to a bone nut. This is a guitar that I have, every time I've ended up selling a Johnny Marr, I ended up buying a Johnny Marr again, because it has been a mainstay in my collection for a while now, and I just really, really love this guitar so very much. Now, if you go on Reverb or any of the used marketplaces for the Johnny Marr, the pricing is really going to depend on the color and also the condition. Johnny, being a Jaguar nerd, and just overall being a guitar nerd, really has gone all out over the years and released some really nice special edition colors, like limited run colors of his guitar. Like, for example, I've always wanted to own this Fever Dream Yellow, and sometimes you'll get lucky and find these for a good price. He also did Sherwood Green, Lake Placid Blue, a black model with a black pick guard. So yeah, it seems like depending on the condition, you can get some, sometimes, wow, as cheap as $15.75 apparently. So there are definitely deals to be had on these guitars out there. What's crazy is the fact that these guitars new now are just about $3,000, which is insane. Insane. I remember when these first came out, they were like $1,700, right? And so going up $1,300 since 2012 is craziness. All the rants aside, I've still got to give the Johnny Marr Jaguar an S tier rating. Or maybe, you know what? I'm going to give it, again, because the pickups are not quite my bag. I definitely prefer like EP Custom pickups or Curtis Novak pickups. I'll give it an S minus. An S minus. I think that's fair. We're almost at the end of our list here. And the next one on our list is the other Johnny Marr Jaguar. The Johnny Marr Jaguar Special, which you can still get from some marketplaces. As you can see here, you can still get them from Sweetwater, or you can still get them as an open box from Zounds. This may have even been the review unit that they sent to me. Man, I expressed how much I love this guitar in my full review, which I'm going to leave a link for here. But this guitar is just something special. I recently, as you saw in the previous installment of this ranking series, built my own DIY version of the Johnny Marr Special Jaguar, and the lipstick pickups here really are something special. They're not lying with the naming of this. This is a very special Jag. It definitely has a very different tone profile from the Johnny Marr Jag, in that it definitely is more of a quote-unquote rock machine. This one, unlike the traditional Jaguar or the Johnny Marr Jaguar, the original one, does have 250K pots as well as a 0.01 UF capacitor. So it kind of splits the difference between Strat specs and Jaguar specs with the value of the cap there. I feel like it reduces the amount of mud as you would get with a, 0.047 UF capacitor. But the Kent Armstrong pickups in this, the lipstick pickups, just sound gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. My favorite tone on this Johnny Marr Special Jaguar is definitely the middle pickup by itself, or the series position with the strangle switch engaged. Somehow, despite me loving this original Johnny Marr as much as I do, the 9.5 inch radius of the Johnny Marr Jaguar Special actually feels better to me for some reason, which is crazy. I felt like I knew myself, but apparently I don't. Maybe it was just set up better. The one that I got for review was set up pretty much perfectly out of the box, which was awesome to see. I wish they would do more colors of these rather than just the tuxedo, black and white colorway. Hopefully Johnny will bring that back, because it looks like they're starting to disappear. This was supposed to be a limited run, and originally they were saying that every shop only got one, which I think is very clearly a friggin' lie, because Sweetwater alone has 5 of them here. It's just an awesome Jaguar, and you can get deals on this if you look in the used market. Can you justify this being a $3,000 guitar? It's hard to justify really any non-vintage guitar, in my opinion, as a $3,000, any non-vintage or any non-custom built. Like, I can understand wanting to pay that much money if you are getting everything that you want in a guitar, right? And it's being built by like a reputable luthier or guitar builder, and you're literally getting your wish list fulfilled in a guitar. But that, you know, in this, like, my wish list fulfilled with this would be if they had made this in a burgundy mist metallic with a matching headstock and maybe the 7 1/4 radius and a slightly thinner neck. That I would pay $3,000 for, but in this iteration, I definitely would be on a lookout for used deals, or at minimum go with a retailer like Sounds, where you can split up into easy payments so that you're not hit all at once, and they don't ever charge you interest. They don't use predatory lenders and stuff like that, which is why I really love Sounds overall. So yeah, that said, the Johnny Marr Jaguar Special S tier. It is an S tier guitar. It really is. They are just phenomenal guitars, and very unique Jaguars at that. The next to last Jaguar on our list, and again, like the MIJ, CIJ, there's just too many variations of this to go into detail about each variation here. So this is under the bigger umbrella of Custom Shop Jaguars. And I mean, what can I say aside from the fact that Custom Shop Jaguars are friggin' nice? They really are. They really are something special. When you get them in hand, they are basically using the best of the best for the most part. When it comes to the materials used, a lot of them have like riffs on maple necks, which are going to be less susceptible to warping and stuff over time. They can have closet clean or just completely brand new looking finishes. Sometimes they can have very detailed relics if you're into that sort of thing. The pickups are hand wound in the Custom Shop, and just the attention to detail on most of the Custom Shop Jags and Jazzmasters that I've had come through the shop is it's immediately noticeable. It's not something that you're gonna look at and be like, wow, yeah, nobody spent any time on this. This is just a mass-produced guitar. Whether it's a team built or like a master built, you can tell the attention to detail that was put into these things. Now, surprisingly, I've actually never had a Custom Shop Jazzmaster or Jaguar come through that had an RSD bridge. I feel like none of my clients that have brought the Custom Shops to me have actually gone through and created a rider with the Custom Shop themselves. You have to go through your Custom Shop dealer, like a dealer like Wildwood Guitars or Sweetwater or something, for them to be able to kind of put your rider in so that the Custom Shop knows what to build with you. All of the clients that have brought me their Custom Shop guitars were buying them secondhand from used marketplaces like your Reverbs and your eBays and stuff. So I'm still looking forward to the day where I get to try out this crazy RSD bridge, because it's definitely a highlight, and people try to sell this friggin' bridge for sometimes as much as $1,000 on Reverb and even in the forums. It can't possibly be that special, but yeah, the attention to detail, the sound on these, there's just something extra and special with them. And it's not just snake oil. And I do, as somebody that builds guitars myself, I can appreciate the work that goes into these things, because it's evident, right? It's evident that there is an extra special sheen or air about these guitars that can't be faked when you get them in hand. Now, that said, how much can you really set this apart if you are buying one prefab, right? Buying one prefab from a shop like Sweetwater, how much can you really set it apart from, let's say, another American Jaguar? Now, it's hard to have this debate right now because they're really, aside from the Johnny Marr Jaguars, There really isn't a comparable 62 or 63 or 65 or 66 spec American-made Jaguar out there. I don't know if Fender thinks that the Jaguar is just niche enough that if you want anything like that, that you have to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more than what is readily available in the the mass-produced American units. It's weird. It's just, the thing is that for me, despite appreciating that work, you're never, ever, ever, ever going to make this money back, ever, right? The majority of folks that drop, $5,000, $6,000 on a custom shop will be lucky to sell those at a $2,000 to $2,500 loss. And that's facts. I hate to say it. And that's why if you're going to go custom shop, I'd say just go full hog with it, right? If you can afford a custom shop guitar, and I'm not talking about a used custom shop guitar, but I'm saying if you can afford a brand new custom shop guitar, then you might as well go ham with it and make your wish list, put in your rider. It may take quite a bit of time for them to produce it, but in the end, you get exactly what you want. And the other caveat that I do have to share with you is that, custom shop guitars, despite the attention that goes into them, are still subject to the forces of nature, right? So if you buy one of these ones that has been maybe in storage for a while now, don't be surprised if it does show up with some fret sprout. Don't be surprised if there are some unseated frets. There should be no excuse at this price point. In fact, there really should be a deal with the retailers or the shops that sell these guitars, that before they go out, their shop should have to do a friggin' setup on these guitars, because there is no excuse for a guitar that is $6,200 to be showing up at your doorstep needing more work, right? There is really no excuse, in my personal opinion. I know that's not how things work, but it should be how things work. And yeah, so these are gorgeous guitars, but they are a lot of money. And for me, I could never, ever, right, justify spending this much money on a custom shop. And maybe if I was different, maybe if I couldn't build guitars, again, remember that's a special case with me. I would much rather build my own, but maybe even if I didn't have those skills and I would have to spend money on a tech to do stuff for me, I feel like I could get my ultimate guitar for half the price of what a custom shop goes for. And that's just facts. And there would be no difference. Hand wound pickups and a special bridge and a cool finish with some relicking does not equate to a $6,000 guitar ever. Okay. The only thing that does equate to that, in my personal opinion, is if that guitar actually does have a real history. And that is going to be how we finish off our list. But before we get there, I have to consider value for money here with a custom shop. But I have to base it also on the merits of, like, are you getting a good guitar out of it? And no doubt you are getting that. But I just feel like the value of it holds it back from being, I don't know. It's hard. If I'm basing it on just the guitar alone, of course it's going to be an S tier. So just know I'm going to put it in the S tier, but I have gripes with it because of the cost. Because is it insane to buy a guitar that is that expensive, despite the fact that there isn't enough really there to merit that? And that's me talking about the ones that are prefab, they're already made, and you're buying them from a retailer. But if you're getting one commissioned and you can land it for that price, and you have that money, and it's your dream guitar, and it's going to be your one, your number one, and you're going to cherish it for the rest of your life or for a long time to come, then you can't really put a price on that. You can't, especially if you have the means to do it. So I'm I'm going to go ahead and give it the S tier. All right, so finally, we are at the end of our list. The very last Jaguar is going to fall under the umbrella of vintage Jaguar. And in particular, I'm just going to go ahead and say 1962 to 1969, because that is the extent of the vintage Jaguars that I personally have worked on. I have never worked on a 1970 and beyond Jaguar. I know that they went further into the 70s, and I can't speak to any of those because I've never owned or played or worked on any of them. But the pre-CBS and post-CBS Jaguars up to 69, I do have quite a bit of experience with, including my pride and joy here, my Joe Riggio body-only refinish 1965 Fender Jaguar. And folks ask me this all the time because obviously you can actually get Fender Jaguars, vintage ones that have been body only refinished for cheaper, and even sometimes an original sunburst finish one for cheaper than you can get a custom shop guitar, which is another reason why I was kind of having a little bit of a struggle there, justifying what rank to give a custom shop guitar, knowing that vintage Jaguars, and in particular vintage refinish Jaguars, exist. There's just something special. There is a undeniable mojo about vintage offsets, regardless of what other guitar gurus and stuff say on YouTube here, saying things like old guitars aren't ever better than new production guitars. They're gaslighting you, first of all. That is pure bullshit, because there is something special to vintage Fenders. And in this Jaguar in particular here, I've never felt a neck like this before. This has almost no taper from the first fret down to the 12th fret here. This has a neck thickness up at the first fret of about 0.85 or 0.86 at the first fret, but then only 1/1000th of an inch thicker at the 12th. So if it's 0.85, it's 0.86 at the 12th fret here. And just so nice and fast and slim and so comfortable to play up here. This one too, it's not common for all even vintage Jaguars, but this one here is only 7.7 pounds, which is bonkers for a Jag. The reason why I say those people who say that stuff, that vintage guitars are no different or no better than new guitars, I personally think they're full of shit, because you can feel it. The quality of the vibrato units, of the springs that were used in here are different. The quality of the sound, or just the character of the sound of these vintage 1965 pickups, they sound like no other modern production. Even the best of the best of the best custom pickup winders, there's something that I feel like the Elements did over time, over the 60-ish years that this guitar has been in existence, that they cannot fabricate in the modern day. You cannot get pick guards, right? Real celluloid nitrate pick guards. You can get copies that get pretty close, but definitely not anything off the shelf. And you're definitely going to have to pay a pretty penny to get one. But there's just something undeniable about these vintage guards. Hilariously, some folks are like, Eddie, really, buddy? You're still rocking the vintage bridge? Yes, because these were hand carved necks back then, right? Each one of these is unique. Even if I got another 1965 that was made a day after this one, no two would be alike. No two would sound exactly alike, because everything was hand done. And I think that human touch is what makes them special. This is not a perfect 1 5/8 inch nut width here, right? It might be a little bit wider. It might be a little bit slimmer. And so for that, this vintage bridge that I can dial in the string spacing that I want is the only bridge that feels right to me on this guitar. I've tried to put premium aftermarket bridges in here. pretty much every premium aftermarket bridge that exists, I've tried to put into this guitar, and nothing ever felt as right to me as this otherwise janky vintage bridge. This guitar, I feel like, was like sent from heaven. And I am not joking. You are going to have to pry this away from my dead body before I get rid of this Jaguar. That is how special it is to me. And I've learned my lesson because I have sold off vintage guitars in the past that I so very dearly, dearly miss. And I'm never going to make that mistake with this one because it is something special. And there is something to this that no custom shop guitar has ever been able to touch, not in sound, not in feel. And so undoubtedly, you do have to do your due diligence. You do have to do your research. I'd say that if you are in the market for vintage, obviously, if you can go check it out in person from a reputable dealer, that is the most ideal situation that you can set up for yourself. But that said, even sometimes reputable dealers will overlook specific things because they're not as familiar maybe as they should be with vintage Jaguars or vintage offsets in general. And you'll see things that have been swapped out. You'll see things that are missing that should be there. You'll see things that have been refinished when they had been billed as original. So that is kind of the adventure of buying a vintage Jaguar or a vintage Fender in general, that not everybody has the constitution to embark upon that kind of journey, really. And so I personally think there's no greater adventure as far as guitar shopping goes than trying to finally get yourself a vintage Jaguar or a vintage Jazzmaster and such. These really run the gamut price wise. And it's been pretty crazy, in the recent past. Vintage guitars tend to hold their value, and obviously the more original parts are missing, like this. This is gorgeous. This $42.50. I mean, I wish I paid only $42.50 for this, but you can see that it is missing. It's missing its original pickups. It has repro tuners. It has a mastery bridge instead of the original one. The pots have been switched out. They don't know who refinished this one. So really the only thing that's vintage here is like the husk and maybe the pick guard, right? And the neck plate and the control plates, all of that stuff are original, but the rest of it has been swapped out. So maybe this is a little expensive for that kind of price. Maybe you can haggle them down further. But more original examples like this one here, expect to pay probably like, $6,000 plus for these. And then your original ones, depending on the custom color, if it's a rarer custom color, you could end up paying $10,000 plus if that's something that you are seeking. The downside to vintage guitars is that it's not something that you are ever really going to feel perfectly comfortable playing or touring with. I did back when I was an idiot. I always brought my 63 and my 65 Jaguar and played it at so many shows. I brought it on tour. Stupid in hindsight, but I enjoyed playing them there. And I guess back then I was reckless and didn't feel like I really had anything to lose. But when you are traveling and on tour or even playing local shows, all you need is one bad actor to come in and 1 second where you've left your gear unattended and your shit's gone. And you may never get it back. I hear those horror stories time and time again, and I just feel so horrible for those folks. And always hope that they end up being reunited with their instruments. But that is one downside. But the upside again too, even over a custom shop, is when I get a refinished Jaguar, one that already has history, one that already has battle scars and stuff that it is accrued over the many years that it's been on Earth. I don't feel so precious with it. I will throw this down. I will put it, against an amp and stuff like that because, well, number one, I don't ever put it in a situation where I think can very easily break, but also I'm not going to baby it. I'm not going to think that it's the end of the world if I accidentally knock into a corner and put another little ding on it or another little chip out. And so I feel like I can rock the hell out of this thing. And I love that. I love that. And there's nothing in the world that I could trade for this, even this specific Jag. Vintage is the ultimate, in my personal opinion. So for that reason, vintage is, if you get a good one, S tier plus. Of course, to be expected, right? And with that, my friends, we have reached the end of our ranking list, and I hope you really enjoyed it. I know that in total, this is like what, almost 3 hours or over 3 hours long if we combine with the duration of the first installment of this, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it informed you well, but also, as I said in the first video, do not let me be the only source of information for you. If you are in the market for a Jaguar and are about to pull the trigger on one, do your research, do your due diligence, find the reviews and experiences from others, those who are not on YouTube, those who are not on Instagram. Find those people, ask questions, especially if you are buying online. Do not hesitate to be meticulous with the asking of questions, because you will better cover yourself if something ends up showing up that isn't the way that it should be. And also, especially if you are paying top dollar for something like vintage, don't shy away from getting it appraised as well. Find a reputable dealer, someone who has a well-documented track record with experience with these guitars, so that they can tell you what's what. Because to the untrained eye, a lot of stuff can slip under the radar. But anyway, I hope you found this informative. I hope you found it enjoyable. Definitely let me know down in the comments your thoughts. Jaguars that you own, what you love about them, what you wish was different, and maybe also Jaguars that are on your wish list that you hope to own one day, and why. I definitely am interested to see them, and I know other folks who are watching this video would be as well. If you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And also, before I go, I just want to thank you all so much. We hit 10,000 followers, I think like a week or two ago, which is a huge hallmark for us to reach since I started this YouTube channel in October of 2024. So I just want to again give my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of you for your continued love and support and engagement, and just, you know, having fun and nerding out with me about offset guitars on this channel. So thank you. I love all of you. Thank you so very much. And with that, don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.